Hello friends, greetings for the day. Since last couple of videos we are discussing the Microsoft team governance. We have discussed what is the governance, what is the Microsoft team governance, what are the decisions to be taken to implement the Microsoft team governance in our organization. Let's proceed further. We have seen that in the last video we have seen that team lifecycle management, and we also discussed that this is the Azure premium feature. Organizations require the Azure P1 licenses for setting the expiration policies for the Office 365 group. But what if suppose we don't have the Azure Premium feature for our tenant? We have a small organization and we have only the Microsoft 365 licenses. So it requires the custom implementation in that case. Otherwise, take another use case where we need to finalizing teams, administrators and owners. One of the team's governance decision point is finalize the minimum required number of the owners. So say my organization has a policy that every Microsoft 365 group has minimum 2 owners. Then in that case, there is a no out of box approach options available to set the minimum number of required teams owners. So in that case, we need a custom implementation. Or say, for example, my team administrator or global administrators needs a report that which shows that, okay, these are the Microsoft 365 groups and these are the number of owners. So in that case, I need a custom implementation. And here the Microsoft graph come into the picture. So today's our topic discussion point or agenda is to understand the Microsoft Graph APIs. This is a beginner level. Here my whole intention is to just understand what are the Microsoft Graph APIs, for what purpose they are used. And then we'll have the series, the implementation for the Microsoft team governance. So today's topic is introduction to Microsoft Graph for beginners. We have discussed the use cases where the Microsoft graphs comes into the picture. Now let's begin the fun. Before going into the depth of the Microsoft graph or before starting the discussing Microsoft graph, let's go back to some history. Let's go back. Suppose for example, so now we are saying that we need to find the number of group owners for each Microsoft 365 group. So Microsoft 365 group is a service of comes under the Microsoft 365, or I need to find the teams, or I need to specify the team's duration, or I need to customize that implementation that my custom emails should go when the team expires to the team administrator, or I should give the links to into the email that renew for a year or 2 or 3. So in this case, I need a customization. So I need to access my teams. I need to verify what the duration set is. Is it the time for renewal of team or not? And then send the respective communication email to the team owners or team administrators or global administrator, whoever. So in that case, I need to access the Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is again one of the Microsoft 365 service. So here I need to pull the data. So what happened before Microsoft Graph? Previously, there are the different endpoints or services available to access the data from the Microsoft 365 cloud or from the Microsoft 365 services. For example, I need to pull some Outlook data. I need to pull some some user data from the Microsoft 365, or I need to pull the data from myself. I need to pull the data from OneDrive, or I need to query to the OneDrive. So in that case, or Microsoft 365 groups or teams, in that case, I have a different endpoint before the Microsoft Graph comes into the picture. Different mechanism to access those. Permission models are different. Data models are different. The return data like JSON format, XML format. So those are different. So there were lots of hurdle and the developer's life is not so easy. So they need to remember path for or endpoint for each service. OneDrive, OneNote group, 365 group teams, that kind of thing. They need to remember the different permission models, different data models, and so on. And that's why it was the developer's life was it's hard to remember all those things. Then the Microsoft comes up with the Microsoft Graph into the picture, and it become bit easy for the developer because now access to the every service of the Microsoft 365 or to get the data from the Microsoft 365 cloud, there is a single endpoint, https://graph.microsoft.com, this one. So I no need to remember different paths endpoints for my each service available under the Microsoft 365 cloud. That was the first point. It made my life bit easy. Life become easy. Developer no need to remember different paths that we saw, and then the same permission model. Only one-time authentication authorization required. Permission model is same. The return data format is the same JSON format, and single access token is required. So currently for now, don't worry what is the access token, how to generate the access token, how to use it to use the Microsoft Graph APIs. We will see in the upcoming series. What here to understand, our whole intention is to understand Microsoft Graph. So Microsoft Graph is nothing but the unified service. Microsoft Graph is nothing. Microsoft Graph APIs are the APIs under the single path, single endpoint. Again repeating https://graph.microsoft.com. Underneath it, we no need to remember the different services, and eventually those will be deprecated because now whole focus is on the Microsoft Graph APIs to get the data from the cloud, and we could inject the external data as well. We'll see that in upcoming slides. So here in very simple, this Microsoft Graph is very vast. There are lots of APIs available for different services, and regularly basis updates are coming, but in very simple at high level to understand, it's a unified service provided by the Microsoft to access the data from the Microsoft 365 cloud. Simple. How to do that? What are the prerequisites required to use the Microsoft Graph APIs? Those are security team API. How I could access into them either in PowerShell or in my SPFX component or in my the CSOM application, that we will see step by step or in upcoming series. Okay, so Microsoft Graph made our life, made developers life easy by providing a single unified service. Let's move. Again, along with that, there is a Microsoft Graph Explorer, which is the UI or utility kind of a utility which is available to test the APIs before using those. We will see the demo at the end of the video, and I have a separate video as well, upcoming video as well for Microsoft Graph Explorer. I am a fan of Microsoft Graph Explorer, which is a very handy, very easy to use, and gives me a lots of details. Even it provides the code snippet as well if I want to use in my JavaScript file, or if I want to use in my CSOM file. That kind of things it provides. We will see at the end of video. We will see a very small demo in this video. In next video we will have a detailed demo for that. Along with that, Microsoft Graph is not only coming with the REST APIs, but it having the SDKs are available. Rather than we play with the HTTP request, we have a directly SDK, which is abstraction based on the APIs provided us, so we could directly use it like API. And those are not only for one particular language or something. It's but for, if you see here into the onto the screen, it's a Angular, Android, for SDK available for .NET, for iOS, for even for Java, JavaScript, all those things, Python, PHP, React. So these are like the SDKs are available, which are very easy to use. We just need to add the respective references and start using the SDKs. If we are not, we don't want to do with the HTTP request, so we could directly play with the respective objects. So that was again one of the advantage of the Microsoft Graph. Now, if you see here a picture, so even though it's not only related to Office 365 or Microsoft 365, but it's a Windows 10 Enterprise Mobility Plus Security. And then this is the framework. Microsoft Graph API is a gateway to access the data from all these services from the Microsoft Cloud 365 Cloud, or we can use that in our web apps and the jobs and even bots, or as a background process as a job, and in the native apps devices like even the Android app and iOS app. So this indicates that the how the Microsoft Graph APIs are coming and how those are very useful for developing any kind of application. So Microsoft Graph is a gateway to data in Microsoft 365. It also allows us to access the data from Dynamic 365 Business Central. So those are the REST APIs, or as we saw, the client SDKs available, client libraries available to access data from Microsoft 365 services, any kind of services under the Microsoft 365, Dell, Calendar, Bookings, Groups, Teams, OneDrive, OneNote, People, Planner, all those services available under the Microsoft 365 services. Not only the Microsoft 365 services, but enterprise mobility and the security services as well. Like when we get that, when we need a data from like or implement the applications like using the advanced threat analytics, advanced threat protections, AD, Azure Active Directory, Identity Manager, Intune, and so on. Same for the Windows 10 services like activities, devices, notification, universal print. So it is Microsoft Graph APIs are not only available as for Microsoft 365 services, but enterprise mobility and security services, as well as Windows 10 services, and even for now the Dynamic 365 business. Okay. Now, this is a Microsoft 365 platform. This diagram I took from the Microsoft site. It's a courtesy of the Microsoft to provide us this very useful diagram to understand the whole concept what comes Microsoft Graph. As we saw, the Microsoft Graph is like to get the data, to pull the data from Microsoft 365 services, Windows 10 and enterprise mobility plus security. But not only that, there are some connectors, Microsoft Graph connectors, which allows us to pull the external data into the Microsoft Graph and use the application like in a search. So those are the connectors available to get the data from the external sources like Jira, Salesforce, Box, this kind of the external application from where we could pull the data with the help of Microsoft Graph connectors and put the data into the Microsoft Graph. We'll see the detailed video for this, how to implement it. Then this is not only this is the external input data to the Microsoft Graph, but then Microsoft Graph also provides the data to the Azure platform with the help of Microsoft Graph Data Connect. So Microsoft Graph Data Connect, we use it to have the data available to the Azure services like cognitive services, Azure AI services, to implement the AI kind of applications. So Microsoft Graph is not only like the REST APIs and webhooks or client libraries, but also we have like Microsoft Graph connectors, Microsoft Graph Data Connect. And here again we see our applications workflow automation. Now we could use the Microsoft Graph APIs in the Power Automate as well. Analytics applications, device apps and bots, web apps. And whole thing we could extend Microsoft 365 by pulling the documents, conversation, portals, time, all those things. So this is the from this you could understand how important is Microsoft Graph to understand, because everything whatever we do, the build application based on the cloud services, Microsoft cloud services, Azure, or even now the Dynamic 365, we will need a Microsoft Graph. So it's very important to understand what is a Microsoft Graph. Okay, sorry, let's move next. Yeah, so there were 3 ways we saw that to facilitate: either REST API slash client libraries, SDKs available, where REST API is a single public endpoint, graph.microsoft.com. Data connects, we saw that it set up tools to access data and provide this data to Microsoft Azure to develop intelligent applications like automate knowledge. These are the examples of the application which we could do: knowledge base creation or meeting request to find uh, utilization of meeting rooms and so on. And then the connectors, which brings external data to Microsoft Cloud into the Microsoft Web. So these are the external data into the Microsoft Graph services, and can be used like into the search the that data using the Microsoft Search. Microsoft Graph connectors create connections to external data source, index that data and store it as a into the items or external custom files. As we discussed, the Box, Google Drive, Jira, and Salesforce, that kind of application from where this list is big, where we could pull the data, and that was the input to the Microsoft Graph services to implement the applications. To use that data in our Microsoft 365 applications. For example, we saw that search application. Even we saw the Microsoft Search, very powerful search that is that is also powered by Microsoft Graph now. So even the search uses the Microsoft Graph now. So from this we could understand that how important is to understand what is a Microsoft Graph. I'm repeating, this is a single unified service which allows us to pull the data from the Microsoft 365 cloud of all all of its services. Here we saw the two use cases, or the governance use cases, where we saw the details videos on the implementation as well, where we need to read the Microsoft 365 group, or if we are automating the process of group creation or teams creation, then we have an option of the Microsoft Graph API to create the Microsoft 365 group or to associate a team with the group. Such kind of use cases, and there are this is not only related to since we are discussing the teams governance, so we are discussing these use cases, but there are other n number of use cases where we need to implement intelligence application, where we require the data or insights from the Microsoft 365 and pass it to the Azure. So at that time also we use the Microsoft Graph Data Connects, and then to integration with the external sources to search the data from the external sources. We saw that we have Microsoft Graph connectors are there. So it's a very huge usage of the Microsoft Graph APIs. So it's very necessity for Microsoft 365 developer, Azure developer, Dynamic 365 developer to understand what is Microsoft Graph. So I'm again repeating, Microsoft Graph is nothing but it's like a gateway to have the data from the Microsoft 365, enterprise mobility and security, and Windows 10. So for now, for beginning, we just need to understand that there is a single endpoint REST API available to get the data. Okay. Now, now let's have a demo of the Graph Explorer. So if you go to, if I'm going to the browser, there is a Graph Explorer URL, developer.microsoft.com. This is the URL, this is the utility provided by Microsoft to test the REST APIs of the graph. So if I hit enter, so I am coming to the Microsoft developer, any platform, any language, and it's a tool. Okay, see, let's go back. This is the code sample, this is the documentation here, and let's go back to the actual portal. developer.microsoft.com en-s graph here and Graph Explorer. Now since I'm already signed in, so it shows me here sign in. If we open this URL in another browser, say for example here, it will give us the demo user of the sign in, and we could execute the query against that. Say for example here, if you see the authentication, you are currently using a sample account. It Graph Explorer provides a sample account. If I run the query, we'll get the details of the sample account. All the queries will be executed into the sample account. Here if you see, I'm going again back to that browser where I'm signed in. So this is the Microsoft Graph Explorer. It provides us to execute the REST APIs, graph REST APIs available for Microsoft 365 services. So it provides very good utility here. There are two versions. Currently one is in beta and another is V1.0. So best practice is if we are using for the implementation of some production application, we must use the V1.0. Okay, because beta APIs are subject to change, so they can change it. And then here the queries get formed. So here, if you notice this query, this is the getting details for my user profile. The beauty of this Graph Explorer, it provides the request body, response body, then the permissions, which permissions are required to execute this kind of query. Another beauty is the code snippets it provides. So for example, if I run this query, so it gives me the response, all my users details, the display name, job title, email ID, and whatever the details I have given here. Not only this, but it provides this code snippet if I want to use this query in my application. So I need to use like this way. It not only provides the code snippet for my C# application, but if I want to use in JavaScript, say for example in SPFX components, then this is the code. It's very handy. I no need to go search or something. I no need to worry about the syntax because I could copy it directly from here. It provides a code snippet for Java, for Objective-C. So this is very, very good tool. It not only these things, but it also provides these samples for all services. See, Microsoft Teams beta in 7, Microsoft Teams which are already in the production. From beta we'll get what are the comings, the APIs for the Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, OneNote, Outlook, Calendar, People. So it provides the sample queries as well for all kind of services of the Microsoft 365. So I'll go for the detail for the Microsoft Graph Explorer in the next video, and I will demonstrate all those things, Graph Explorer and our APIs and the code snippets, what is the access token, the modify permissions, the permissions required to execute these queries like user read all, whether those are admin consented or not, what is meant by admin consented or not, all this will cover into the next video. But then for today's discussion, it's very handy tool to test these the APIs, and then if we are using the HTTP request in our application, we could directly copy paste those, and we could verify our result as well, whether it's returning the correct result or not, whether it's returning what the status it's returning or not, based on the permissions and all those things. It provides us the history of our queries as well, which we executed. So again, back to the presentation. Here my intention is to give the glimpse of the Microsoft Graph APIs to simplifying the understanding of the Microsoft Graph APIs before starting using it. So stay tuned for the next upcoming videos where I'm going to discuss the Microsoft Graph Explorer and the next steps, what are the prerequisites to use the Microsoft Graph APIs in my application. Since we discussed these are the security trim APIs, it requires the access token. So we are going to discuss detail what are the access tokens, how to generate the access token, what are required, as your app required, client secret key required, we could use the certificate, we could query to the graph, we could use the graph APIs with the help of username, password, what are the best practices to use it, and then a simple application through CSOM, through client-side object model connecting to the Microsoft Graph API and getting some data, pull some data, say for example list of groups or list of teams, get that some data. So this we are going to discuss, so please stay tuned for the next upcoming videos. Again, in case if you have any query related to the Teams governance, Microsoft Graph APIs, or any Microsoft 365 features, please feel free to connect with me at my Gmail ID or Twitter handle Sabadra Prashram, or you could message me on the LinkedIn as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like it or interested to have exploring more on Microsoft Teams, Microsoft 365 groups, and the Microsoft 365 features or services, please subscribe this channel. Thank you so much.